Rock pioneer Sly Stone of Sly and the Family Stone has died at 82 after a prolonged battle with COPD and other underlying issues.
But did you hear the way those?
See, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
If somebody says marijuana, they'll point right to me.
Yeah.
It makes me hoarse. I tried it before.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
But no, but
I know. You know what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
Those kind of rumors start.
The secret Sly Stone took to his grave wasn't about money. It was about who he really was when the cameras stopped rolling.
About 8 times.
Eight times. So what do you think's going to be different this time than from the past times that you've gone?
Well, because I'm going to do it the way I want to do it.
8 times in rehab for addiction. But the real addiction was lying about his for 50 years. When he died on June 9th, 2025, that lie died with him.
Players in the lawsuit are getting killed. And I'm not really into that. I don't really care about no $50 million.
$50 million in stolen royalties. People getting murdered over contracts. And Sly Stone didn't care about any of it, because what he was hiding was worth more than money and more dangerous than death. So, let's get into it. The man-born Sylvester Stewart had conquered the world by the time he was 26. Sly and the Family Stone wasn't just a band, it was a revolution. The first integrated group where black and white, male and female musicians shared the stage as equals. Their performance at Woodstock in 1969 was legendary. Dance to the music, Everyday People, I Want to Take You Higher. These weren't just songs, they were anthems of hope. But success came with a price that nobody could have anticipated. By 1970, the mansion in Beverly Hills became a fortress of paranoia. And PCP flowed like water. Bodyguards with guns patrolled the grounds. Attack dogs roamed free, including one named Gun that Sly eventually killed himself when it became too dangerous.
In what sense is the group a family? Why do you call it the Family Stone? Were they originally, are they all members of the same Jewish family named Stone or something? No, I guess not. I mean, you thought of the name, I assume.
You didn't let me answer, though.
No, you're going to answer
Okay.
now.
Even at the height of his fame, there was something different about Sly Stone. The way he moved, the way he talked, the way he deflected personal questions with humor and misdirection. He was playing a character, the funky, confident superstar, while hiding something deeper underneath. The weren't just about getting high, they were about escape. It threw your perspective off, which I liked. He would later admit about his PCP use. But what was he trying to escape from? Success? Fame? Or something about himself that he couldn't face? The first major crack in the facade came in 1971 with There's a Riot Going On. Gone were the sunny, optimistic anthems. This was dark, murky, paranoid music. The title track was 0 minutes of silence, literally nothing. It was Sly Stone's way of saying the party was over, but nobody understood why. Band members started quitting. Shows were canceled. The man who once filled stadiums with joy and unity was becoming unreliable, unpredictable, and dangerous. Cynthia Robinson, the trumpet player, remembered, "I never quit the band. I just stopped getting calls for gigs." By 1975, Sly and the Family Stone was finished. The integrated family that had shown America what harmony could look like had torn itself apart. But Sly's personal destruction was just beginning. The drugs that started as recreation became survival. The man who wrote Everyday People, celebrating differences and unity, was running from something about his own identity that he couldn't reconcile. Studio sessions became nightmares. Label executives would install recording equipment in his apartment, just hoping he might create something. Miles Davis visited once, planning to collaborate, but fled when he saw the chaos. There were nothing but girls everywhere, and coke, bodyguards with guns, looking all evil. We snorted some coke together, and that was it. The rumors started early and never stopped. David Letterman would later joke about them on national television, but for Sly, they weren't funny. Every question about his personal life, every speculation about his relationships, every whisper about who he really was underneath the leather and flash, it all became ammunition for a war he was fighting with himself. The 1980s should have been Sly Stone's comeback decade. Instead, they became his lost years. While Prince was building an empire inspired by Sly's blueprint, while hip-hop was sampling his beats to create an entirely new genre, the man who started it all was hiding from the world. In 1983, the inevitable happened. Arrest in possession. 6 months in rehab, but it was a joke. A nurse gave him advance notice of tests so he could always pass. The addiction continued, but something else was eating at him from the inside.
It was presented to me as being, at one time, a popular rumor that you were romantically involved, or dating, or whatever you do, with Doris Day.
I know the lady. She's a great lady. I met the lady through her son, Terry.
The Doris Day rumor was typical of the speculation that followed Sly everywhere. Hollywood loved to create romantic narratives, especially involving a black superstar and white celebrities. But notice how quickly he shut down that line of questioning, how uncomfortable he became when forced to discuss his romantic life on national television. There were other rumors whispered in industry circles about Sly's true preferences, about why he never seemed comfortable discussing women in interviews, about why his marriage to Kathy Silva at Madison Square Garden in 1974 felt more like performance art than romance, about why, despite his symbol status, he seemed to keep his private life impossibly private. The marriage itself was telling, a public spectacle at the world's most famous arena, performed in front of 22,000 fans, followed by a concert. It was as if Sly needed witnesses to prove something to the world. But the marriage didn't last long, and afterward, he retreated even further from public view. By the 1990s, when Sly and the family Stone were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the man who had once commanded stages with magnetic presence could barely function in public. He arrived 10 minutes late to his own induction ceremony, after his bandmates had already given their speeches. It was a metaphor for his entire relationship with fame, always running from the spotlight that once defined him. The music industry had moved on without him. The artists he inspired, Prince, Michael Jackson, every hip-hop producer who sampled his drums, were selling millions while he struggled to stay relevant. But the real tragedy wasn't professional failure. It was personal isolation. A man who had created music about bringing people together was completely alone. During this period, the whispers about his grew louder among those who knew him. Friends and industry insiders spoke in coded language about Sly's real relationships, about why he had become so reclusive, about what he was really hiding beneath the public persona. But in an era when being openly gay could destroy a career, especially for a black musician who had built his reputation on street credibility, these rumors remained just that, whispers in the dark. By 2009, the unthinkable had happened. Sly Stone, who once lived in a Beverly Hills mansion worth millions, was homeless, living in a white van parked on the streets of Los Angeles' Crenshaw district. The man who created Family Affair had no family to turn to. The artist who wrote Everyday People was invisible to everyone.
I'm there a lot because it's very comfortable for me, because I don't like to be in any one place under the circumstances with this lawsuit, and people are getting killed.
The lawsuit he mentioned wasn't just about money, it was about survival. $50 million in stolen royalties, money that should have kept him comfortable for life. But his former manager, Jerry Goldstein, had systematically stripped away his rights during the worst period of his addiction. In 1989, when Sly was destitute and desperate for drugs, Goldstein made him loans ranging from hundreds to thousands of dollars, money used to fuel his addictions. In exchange, Sly signed away his publishing rights, his royalties, his financial future. It was a calculated exploitation of a man's weakness. While Sly was spiraling into crack addiction, becoming a fugitive from justice, Goldstein was positioning himself to control the fortune that Sly's genius had created. The loans weren't helping a friend. They were creating financial dependency that would last decades. Living in the van, Sly was finally free from the expectations and pressures that had defined his adult life. "I like my small camper," he told reporters. "I just do not want to return to a fixed home. I must keep moving." But the constant movement wasn't just about freedom, it was about hiding. The van became his sanctuary, the only place where he could be completely himself without performance or pretense. Away from industry vultures, away from fair-weather friends, away from anyone who might judge him for who he really was. The isolation was both protective and destructive. During these van years, people would occasionally spot him and try to interview him. These conversations revealed a man who was still brilliant but exhausted by decades of hiding. He spoke about music that existed only in his head, songs he couldn't record because his voice and body had been destroyed by years of abuse. But there was something else in these interviews, a weariness that went beyond and financial problems. When asked about his personal life, about relationships, about love, he would deflect or change the subject. The man who had once been the most charismatic performer in the world couldn't talk about the most basic human connections. The real tragedy of the van years wasn't poverty, it was loneliness. Sly Stone had spent his entire career bringing people together through music, but he couldn't bring himself to connect with anyone on a personal level. The secret he carried was heavier than any financial burden, more isolating than any addiction. In 2011, something miraculous happened. After 8 trips to rehab, countless arrests, and years of homelessness, Sly Stone released "I'm Back, Family and Friends." It was supposed to be his triumphant return, featuring collaborations with Jeff Beck, Bootsy Collins, and other legends who had been inspired by his work. The album was a disaster. Critics destroyed it. Fans ignored it. The man who had once changed music forever couldn't even crack the charts. But for those who listened carefully, there were clues about what Sly had been hiding all these years.
People know me when they'll make things easier for me.
So it was a gift?
Almost all the things are gifts. I give, and people give. And people that love me, they'll take care of me.
People that love me take care of me. It was a telling phrase from a man who had spent decades isolated from human connection. Who were these people? Why had he never spoken about them publicly? What kind of relationships was he describing? The vague language suggested a support system that existed in shadows, relationships that couldn't be acknowledged publicly without raising questions about their nature. The album itself was a mixture of painful nostalgia and missed opportunities. Remakes of 7 Family Stone hits sounded hollow, performed by a voice ravaged by decades of. The 2 new original songs hinted at themes of regret and redemption, but lacked the revolutionary fire that had once defined his work. Most telling were the collaborations, legendary musicians showing up to work with a broken hero, paying respect to his legacy while witnessing his decline. The recording process revealed how far he had fallen. Studio sessions were chaotic, with Sly showing up late or not at all. When he did appear, his voice was a raspy shadow of its former glory. Engineers had to piece together vocals from multiple takes, searching for moments when his damaged instrument could still carry a melody. The man who had once been known for his perfectionism in the studio was now dependent on others to make his music listenable.
Well, I'm too hoarse right now.
Give us a taste.
But I'll give you the words for it.
From the legend, sure.
It says, give the kid a flag, you teach him to salute. You give the kid a gun, you teach him how to shoot. One day, the kid's in the bushes. He starts to cry because never, ever, nobody taught him how to die.
Even his new lyrics reflected a man haunted by what he couldn't say. The song about the kid in the bushes who starts to cry because never ever nobody taught him how to die wasn't just about war. It was about the slow of living a lie. The metaphor of being taught to salute and shoot but never to die suggested someone who had been trained to perform but never to truly live. The rehab attempts were becoming increasingly desperate. Each time he promised it would be different. Each time he failed. But something changed after his final stint in 2019. At age 76, he finally got clean, not because of medical threats or legal pressure, but because he was tired of hiding. The drugs had stopped numbing the pain and started amplifying it. For the first time in decades, he wanted to feel everything, even if it hurt.
What happens with me, because to tell you the honest to God truth, when there are people that like to stack up money and they like that, and I don't give a fuck, man. I just like toys, you know what I mean?
His casual dismissal of money revealed something profound about his priorities. "I just like toys," he said, as if $50 million in stolen royalties was nothing more than pocket change. But what were the toys he really wanted? Freedom? Authenticity? The ability to love openly? His indifference to wealth suggested that what he truly valued couldn't be bought. In 2023, he published his memoir, Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again, co-written with Ben Greenman. The book was brutally honest about his use, his financial mistakes, his paranoia, and violence. He admitted to carrying a violin case full of cocaine on tour. He described crack binges that lasted for days. He detailed the systematic theft of his royalties. But even in 400 pages of confessions, there were gaps. Chapters about his personal relationships that felt sanitized. Discussions of love and intimacy that seemed carefully edited. For a man who claimed to be telling his whole story, certain parts remained frustratingly vague. The memoir read like a confession with crucial pages torn out. The memoir did reveal one crucial detail. He had completed a screenplay about his life story before his death. His family promised to share it in due course. But would this final work contain the truths he couldn't speak while alive? Would it finally explain why a man who preached love and unity spent his final decades in complete isolation? Those close to him during his final years spoke of a different Sly Stone, calmer, more at peace, but still guarded about certain aspects of his life. He had made his peace with the money, the career failures, but there was something deeper that he never fully resolved. The war between Sylvester Stewart and Sly Stone was still being fought behind his eyes. Questlove, who directed a documentary about Sly and published his memoir, understood the burden his hero had carried. "Sly has lived 100 lives," he wrote, "but some of those lives remained hidden, even from those who claimed to know him best." The man who had taught America that different strokes for different folks was still struggling to accept his own differences. On June 9, 2025, Sly Stone died peacefully at his home in Granada Hills, surrounded by his 3 children and closest friends. The cause was COPD and other underlying health issues. The physical toll of decades of abuse finally catching up with him. He was 82 years old. The obituaries celebrated his revolutionary music, his breaking of racial barriers, his influence on generations of artists. But they also noted the tragedy of his final decades, the addiction, the homelessness, the isolation from the industry he had helped create. What they couldn't mention was the secret that Sly Stone had carried for over 50 years. The reason he had retreated from public life, the source of his paranoia and self-destruction, the truth that he felt he could never reveal without destroying everything he had built. Even in casual interviews, there were hints. The way he deflected questions about relationships, the coded language he used when discussing his personal life, the obvious discomfort whenever the conversation turned to romance or In the 1970s and 80s, being openly gay would have been career suicide for a black funk star. The community that had embraced Sly Stone's music wasn't ready for that truth. Hip-hop culture, which sampled his beats religiously, was openly hostile to gay artists. The street credibility that defined his image was incompatible with the sexual identity he was hiding. So he built walls. He used to numb the pain of living a lie. He created personas and characters that could interact with the world while his true self remained hidden. The flamboyant stage outfits, the androgynous look, the gender-bending style, it was all there for those who knew how to read the signs. The marriage to Kathy Silva was a performance, a necessary illusion to maintain his image. The relationships with women that tabloids reported were carefully constructed facades. The real Sly Stone was living a double life that eventually became unbearable. By the 1980s, the weight of the secret had become crushing. The drugs weren't just about getting high. They were about escaping from a life that felt like constant performance. The isolation wasn't just about paranoia. It was about the exhaustion of pretending to be someone he wasn't. The Van years were, in many ways, his most honest period. Alone, broke, forgotten by the industry, he could finally stop performing. He could be himself, even if himself was damaged and broken by decades of denial. His family's statement after his death mentioned the screenplay he had completed about his life. Those who knew him best believe this final work contains the truth he could never speak publicly. Whether it will ever be shared with the world remains uncertain. Sly Stone died as he had lived his final decades, carrying a secret that was too dangerous to reveal but too heavy to bear. The man who brought people together through music spent his life divided against himself. The artist who preached everyday people couldn't find the courage to be who he was every day. The funk revolution he started continues to influence music today. His beats still drive hip-hop tracks. His messages of unity and acceptance still resonate. But the greatest tragedy of Sly Stone's life was that he never felt free to live by his own lyrics. Different strokes for different folks. In death, he took the secret with him, but perhaps, finally, he found the peace that eluded him in life. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.